Every morning, Linda and I have this habit of staying in bed for a few extra minutes after the alarm goes off. We've been together long enough to know what works best for us. Those warm, lazy minutes feel so good, but they come at a cost, a frantic rush to get ready for work. Back when the kids were still at home, that mad dash included getting them off to school. Now that they're grown and out of the house, we find ourselves lingering in bed even longer before facing the morning chaos, which always leads to the drive to work. To make things more stressful, I had to leave the house a good 20 minutes earlier than usual today. Linda had to work late tonight, so we decided to carpool since our offices aren't far from each other. But instead of taking my car, I opted to ride my mountain bike to work. The weather forecast promised a beautiful spring day, and it seemed like the perfect opportunity. I took the last bite of my toast, washed it down with a swig of coffee, and was ready to head out. "I'm on my way, honey," I called out toward the bathroom, where Linda was still getting ready. I waited for her to respond, maybe poke her head out the door, but I got nothing. "I'll see you tonight." "I love you," I added, though I was in a rush and didn't have time to dwell on her silence. With that, I tossed my keys in my backpack and headed out the door. Let me introduce myself. I'm John Harris, a 53-year-old office manager at the State Department of Public Works. My wife, Linda, is 49 and works as an administrative assistant in the main office of a manufacturing company. We're a good-looking couple, if I do say so myself, but Linda is stunning, especially for her age. She doesn't look anywhere near 50, and I've noticed plenty of men turning their heads when we're out together. About 10 minutes into my ride, my phone pinged with a text message. A few seconds later, it started ringing. Trying to navigate traffic on a bike while answering a call is a challenge, so I ignored it. By the time I got to work, I was in such a hurry to get dressed for an 8:45 meeting that I forgot all about the phone calls. It wasn't until my afternoon coffee break that I remembered to check my messages. I had 5 from Linda, 2 texts and 3 voicemails. The first text came in at 8:10, saying, "You grabbed the wrong keys." "Call me." The second one arrived at 8:35, "I'm waiting for your call." When I finally listened to the voicemails, the first one, left at 8:11, said, "Hi, honey. You took the wrong set of keys when you left. Could you drop them off at my work this morning? I'm going to need them. Call me." Her voice had a sharp edge to it, which was odd. She didn't need those keys at work. They use a fancy security system with key cards. The second voicemail, left around 10:15, was even more irritable. "What are you doing, John? I've been waiting for the keys all morning. Call me. I have better things to do than wait for you." After 25 years together, 23 of them married, I could tell she was fuming. Her anger dripped from every word. Before I played her last message, I pulled out my keys and laid them on my desk. The final voicemail, left at 12:55, was practically a shout. "Where are you? I'm still waiting for my keys. I don't know what you were thinking this morning, but they'd better be on my desk this afternoon." Linda wasn't holding back. She was livid. I was taken aback. Lately, it seemed like Linda was always mad at me over nothing. I thought maybe it was something to do with her approaching 50, maybe hormonal changes or something. That's what she told me when I asked why she was acting so differently. She snapped at me when I suggested she see a doctor about it, get some hormone therapy, or whatever they do for menopause. Life with Linda had become pretty difficult lately. Our relationship was strained, but it seemed ridiculous that she'd blow up over a set of keys she didn't even need. I've been trying to work on myself, but I'm no pushover. 2 can play at this anger game, I figured. So, I decided not to call her back and just wait until 5 o'clock to bring her the damn keys. A little after 5, I reached her office, just in time to see her pulling out of the parking lot. Big surprise. Despite the traffic and my bike's capabilities, there was no way I could catch up with her. Not that it mattered, we were both heading home. I knew she'd eventually get out of the gridlock and pick up a speed I couldn't match. So, I stuck to my usual, more direct route to see if I could beat her home. But then, something strange happened. I was caught off guard when I saw her car turning toward a different part of town. It was an easier route for me. I could cut through the park, but definitely not the best way for her. She turned onto a street lined with two-story duplexes and parked at the curb. I had a feeling something was up, so I slowed down and watched from a distance as she climbed the stairs and rang a doorbell, all while typing away on her phone. Even from where I was, I could hear her phone chime with a text. She read the message, walked back to her car, and drove off. What the hell just happened? I muttered to myself. Linda, who was supposed to be working late, had shown up at some random apartment. I gripped the keys in my hand, my mind racing. I recognized her car keys and our house keys, but what was really going on here? However, there was another key that I didn't recognize. I had a hunch that this was the key Linda was so desperate to get back. I walked up to the duplex, climbed the stairs, inserted the key into the front door lock, and turned it. The click of the lock felt like the end of my marriage to Linda. I didn't open the door, though. I needed a moment to think. What was I going to do? The rising anger in me made it tempting to barge into my wife's lover's apartment and tear the place apart. Or maybe I could wait for him and beat the crap out of him. Or I could just go to the police and end up in jail. No, acting out of blind anger wasn't the right move. But I had to do something. I glanced inside the apartment. Technically, I was trespassing, but if I moved fast, I wouldn't get caught. The first thing I saw was a neatly stacked pile of mail on a small table in the hallway. I grabbed the phone bill from the top. The letter was addressed to Eric Larson. I had no idea who he was, but the phone bill could be useful. I slipped it into my backpack. That was enough for now. I didn't want to get caught snooping around someone else's apartment, so I got out of there quickly. Instead of heading straight home, I drove to a nearby hardware store. Within minutes, I had a duplicate key made. I expected Linda to be home by the time I got back, but her car wasn't in the driveway. Whatever her lover had texted her, it must have been to meet somewhere else. I decided to mess with her a bit. I called, but she didn't answer. I didn't leave a text, but I did send her a voicemail. I'm running late too, but I'll bring the keys soon. I'll see you at your office. It only took a few seconds to get a reply. That won't be necessary. I've made other arrangements. Just go home, was her immediate response. In her head, she was probably thinking, and leave me alone, idiot. I had a lousy evening. Linda didn't get home until 10 o'clock, giving me a good 4 hours to stew over what had happened. First, I needed proof of her cheating. With a copy of the key now on my keychain, it would be easy to gather what I needed. The phone bill pointed directly to her lover, Eric Larson. They were constantly on the phone and texting each other, even when Linda and I were together in the evenings. All this time, I thought she was texting the kids. Did I really need to know why she had decided to leave me? No, it didn't matter anymore. Our love had faded over the past 6 months. Indifference, constant nagging, and blame can only go on for so long before a man's love fades. Now I saw it clearly. Linda had been distancing herself from our marriage for a while. Today's discovery was just the final blow to a marriage that had already gone to hell. We were done. There's no benefit to proving adultery in our state. Irreconcilable differences would be the reason, and the judge would split our assets 50-50. But as the cheated husband, I felt I had a lot to gain by reclaiming some of my pride. I wasn't going to let Linda get away with lying while married. The truth would be known to our kids, parents, and friends. And knowing how Linda had changed over the past few months, I wouldn't be surprised if she tried to paint me as the bad guy somehow. I did toy with many revenge scenarios, but I decided not to go down that path. I only had a few years before early retirement, and I didn't want to mess that up. Retirement wouldn't be what I had envisioned all those years ago with Linda, but it was better than ending up in jail and losing my job. At least I'd enjoy my retirement my way, not Linda's. When she finally got home, I decided to let her irritation work in my favor. Maybe she'd start a small argument, which could excuse my icy behavior over the next few days. But sex with Eric must have calmed her down a bit. When she walked in, she wouldn't even meet my eyes. Linda seemed surprised to find me still sitting in the living room. She tossed the spare car key into the dish by the door and grabbed her usual set, which I'd placed there earlier. After one look, she tossed them into her purse. I expected a grunt or something, but she didn't say a word. She headed straight for the bathroom. "I'm tired," she muttered to no one in particular as she walked down the hallway. "I'm going to take a shower and go to bed." "What?" I called after her. "No love tonight?" Her only response was to close the bathroom door behind her and lock it. Do you know many married people who lock the bathroom door? I hadn't noticed it before, but now that I thought about it, she did that a lot when she came home late. God, I was so stupid. No wonder she was leaving me. Before going to bed, I watched the evening show. I hoped Linda was sound asleep. But I swear, she was still awake. Sleep was escaping both of us. The next morning, under the pretense of a meeting, I left early in my car. Instead of heading to work, I went to an electronics store and bought some interesting items. It only took me a couple of hours to wire Eric Larson's apartment for sound and video. While I was there, I had time to look around. The place was nicely furnished, with many items that looked like antiques. I don't know if he had a maid, but the apartment was spotless, not a speck of dust anywhere. I wondered if he was a stickler for cleanliness. It gave me something to think about as I set up the equipment. I had hoped my little surveillance setup would stay under the radar for a few days, at least long enough to capture some scandalous photos of my wife and her lover. It turns out I didn't need to worry about that at all. Back at the office after lunch, another text from Linda popped up, telling me not to wait up because she had another late meeting. I went ahead and scheduled an appointment with the lawyer for the next day. That evening, I drove past Larson's apartment and spotted Linda's car. Despite everything that had transpired over the past 24 hours, the sight of her car still made my heart sink, a fresh stab of her betrayal. Tomorrow was going to be crucial. I drove back home, tempted to check into the town motel. But it seemed absurd to waste money on a place I didn't want to be when none of this was my fault. Once back, I thought about sleeping in the guest bedroom but decided against it. After all, I wasn't the one who had wrecked our marriage. Let Linda take that room. I dumped all of her belongings into the guest room haphazardly, whole drawers piled on the bed and clothes yanked out of her side of the closet and thrown in there. It was a surprisingly therapeutic task. With each armful I carried to the guest room, I felt a bit better. When Linda came home that evening, she looked even worse than she had the night before. She had that disheveled look that suggested she had just come from a marathon session with someone else. Again, she was caught off guard by my presence. She didn't offer any explanations for her tardiness or appearance, as if there was anything she could say that would make it better. I couldn't believe I was the source of such pain. With the impending divorce hanging over us, I grabbed her hand and pulled her towards the bedrooms. "What are you doing, John?" "You're hurting me," she whimpered. I forced myself to sound more confident than I felt. I knew I was on the brink of losing her completely. I needed to act quickly and keep my composure. "Shut up, bitch," I said loudly, surprising even myself with the harshness of my words. It was so unlike me to speak like that, as if I were hitting her with my words. Suddenly, the accusatory glares I'd been receiving for months turned into fear. But was it fear of violence or fear of exposure? I had no idea, and I wasn't about to ask. I opened the guest bedroom door so she could see her belongings stacked in disarray. "Starting tonight, this is your room," I said sharply, shoving her inside. "We're no longer husband and wife." "Stay away from me," I added. "In fact, it'd be better if you packed up and left right now." Linda was furious and tried to resist, insisting, "Oh no, you bastard. If anyone's sleeping in the guest room, it's you." She ranted about all she had done for the kids, for me, and the house, demanding respect or for me to leave. Did I want to argue with her? No. I shoved her back into the guest room with a surprising force. "I'm giving you two choices," I growled. "Either you stay here until the divorce is final, or you move in with Eric Larson right now." Her reaction to Larson's name was immediate. Despite her recent behavior, she knew me well enough to realize I was aware of her affair and had no intention of forgiving her. She knew we would never part as friends. Who could be friends with someone who stabbed you in the back? I could see the defeat in her eyes. She stumbled into the room, threw her clothes aside, and sat on the bed, tears streaming down her face. She muttered something I couldn't catch. "What?" I shouted. "I'm sorry," she said louder. "I was so stupid." "Please don't hate me, you know me, Linda," I replied. "I won't hate you forever, but I'm sure I won't love you either. Hell, I don't even know if I can be around you." I began to close the door but decided to add one final blow. "I'd prefer if you left as soon as possible," I said firmly. "Just sign the divorce papers when they arrive, and we'll never have to see each other again." I shut the door, leaving her behind with her sobs as the last sound I heard. The next day, I retrieved my spy gear from Larson's place and then headed to my attorney. Since my demands were straightforward, he assured me the divorce papers would be ready within 2 days. I paid him up front and left. I tried to return to work, but it proved futile. I finally explained my situation to my supervisor, who advised me to take a few days off. When I drove home, I saw Linda moving her things out and parked further down the street. From the video I had, I recognized Eric Larson helping her. I wanted to beat him up, but with his extra 3 inches and 40 pounds, that wasn't a practical option. I drove away. That night, the real impact of Linda's betrayal hit me. My anger faded, replaced by an overwhelming loneliness I had never felt before. The divorce would have been even more devastating if our children were still living with us. While the absence of them was a blessing, it was also a curse, leaving me with no one to lean on. My parents were gone, and my brother and sister lived far away. I decided to reach out to my 2 daughters, only to find out that Linda hadn't even contacted them yet. She had always been in touch with them while they were in college, so I guess it was easier for her to lie to me than to them. A few weeks ago, if someone had asked me how to handle a cheating spouse, I would have said to stay discreet, keep the peace, and honor the 23 years of commitment as a wife and mother. But now, suffering and desperate for either love or sympathy, I had to confide in my 2 daughters, Emily and Sarah. I was relieved when neither of them questioned me when I revealed that their mother had betrayed me and left me for another man. For a moment, I worried they might have known all along, but seeing their shock and distress reassured me. My barely contained sobs seemed to confirm my story. Their support was a comfort, but it was also a mistake. By the time I reached out to the kids, I had already finished a whole bottle of wine. I'm not much of a drinker. Linda and I would share a bottle or 2 of wine a week, or maybe have a few beers. The problem wasn't the drinking itself, but the self-pity fueled by alcohol. When faced with failure, a man must own up to it. Yet, despite my efforts, I couldn't understand what drove Linda away. My job never interfered with my family life. I only traveled for retraining once every 5 years, and my overtime was minimal and predictable. To be honest, I might have let myself go a bit since turning 50, but I wasn't overweight or out of shape. Larson didn't appear much younger or fitter than I was. I wondered if he was a better lover, which was an area where I had limited experience. Before meeting Linda, I had only 4 girlfriends between the ages of 18 and 28, and Linda and I had a lot to learn together. I didn't think Linda left me for social status either. His apartment wasn't extravagant, and while his furniture was nice, he wasn't a father. We were likely in the same income bracket. As I curled up in the fetal position that night, it struck me that there was no real reason for her departure, other than the fact that I was simply who I was. Can you really struggle with being yourself? Could I stop existing just so everything could be all right? The next morning, around 10 o'clock, I got a call. Without checking the caller ID, I answered the phone. "You son of a bitch," Linda yelled. "You shouldn't have been so rude to Emily and Sarah." For a moment, I considered hanging up, but I also wanted to confront her to end this nightmare. "What's rude, sweetie?" I asked. "Is it the months of cheating, moving in with your lover, or is it all of the above?" There was only silence, which I despised. "Linda, I still have some feelings for you," I said. "I'm not sure if it's my male or female side, maybe just my foolish side, but there's one thing I won't do: lie to our family." "You wouldn't dare," she pleaded. "Not Daddy, please." "Watch me," I said, and hung up. My finger hovered over the speed dial for Linda's father, but I didn't press it. Walter had been struggling since his wife passed away from breast cancer 2 years ago. He was a good man, but in his 80s, his health was fragile, and his will to live seemed a bit weak. I could certainly relate to that feeling today. And he was a good man. I figured it was better to let him live in peace rather than let his daughter's actions ruin his life. My anger began to fade, so I decided to inform Linda of my choice. I picked up Larson's cell phone bill and dialed the number listed. A man's voice answered. I hesitated for a moment. "Linda Harris, please," I asked. There was a pause, and I could hear someone crying in the background, presumably Linda. "Who's asking?" Larson's voice came through. "Her father, you piece of shit," I lied, barely containing my fury. "And don't expect to talk to her. Just tell my daughter to forget me. Leave my grandchildren, my son-in-law, and me alone. Goodbye, asshole." Less than a minute later, feeling a bit guilty, I called Linda's cell phone. She answered quickly but was still sobbing. "Hello, Linda," I said, breaking the silence. "Did you have a good day?" "John, why?" she asked. "Why did you tell my father? It could destroy him. He's been in such poor health lately." "You knew that." "Hey, don't shift the blame," I said, struggling with the harsh words. "It wasn't your father on the phone with your lover, it was me. I care about your father, and your cheating would have killed him. I want to make this clear. Are you listening?" "Yes," she replied. "I'm listening. Don't ever let this guy come between me and my daughters, or your father will know everything about you. All the ugly details," I warned her. "Don't think I'm joking. I trusted you for most of my adult life. I didn't think it was possible, but you shattered that trust. I'm fighting not to just end you on sight. I have so much hatred for you right now, and it defines me at this moment. Do you understand?" "Yes," she said through her tears. "Mark, I'm so sorry. I never wanted this." "Neither did I," I said, and hung up. 6 months later, I received the official divorce papers, marking the end of my marriage. I had gotten over my bout of depression, but something still felt missing in my life. I couldn't quite figure out what it was. I tried dating a few women, but things never went far. It seemed like they could sense the emotional baggage I carried. I even had a one-night stand with a work acquaintance who was also divorced. But even that felt hollow, just two people seeking a quick fix for their loneliness. It left me feeling even more isolated than before. One evening, after coming home from work, a revelation struck me. Since moving into my new apartment and selling the old house to split the proceeds, I had started to name the dust bunnies collecting around the place. "Hi, Jack," I greeted, peeking out the door. I was reverting to my bachelor days, naming the dust clumps I found everywhere, mostly behind doors and under the bed. Jack was stationed by the front door, while Roger and Bugs had made a home under the bed. I almost grabbed the vacuum cleaner from the closet, feeling embarrassed at the thought that Larson would never let his place get so messy. As I curled up in the fetal position that night, I had another moment of realization. There was no clear reason for Linda's departure. It was simply because I was who I was. Can one truly struggle with their own identity? Could I just stop existing so everything could be okay? The next morning, around 10 o'clock, I answered the phone without checking the caller ID. "You son of a bitch," Linda yelled. "You shouldn't have been so rude to Emily and Sarah." For a moment, I considered hanging up, but part of me wanted to face the confrontation to end this nightmare. "What's rude, sweetie?" I asked. "Is it the months of cheating, moving in with your lover, or is it all of the above?" There was only silence, which I loathed. "Linda, some part of me still cares about you," I said. "I don't know if it's my male side, female side, or just my foolish side, but one thing I won't do is lie to our family." "You wouldn't dare," she pleaded. "Not Daddy, please." "Watch me," I said, and hung up. My finger hovered over the speed dial for Linda's father, but I didn't press it. Walter had been struggling since his wife died of breast cancer 2 years ago. He was a good man, but in his 80s, his health was fragile, and his will to live seemed weak. I could understand that today. And he was a good man. I figured it was better to let him live in peace rather than ruin his life because of his daughter's actions. My anger began to subside, so I decided to tell Linda my decision. I picked up Larson's cell phone bill and dialed the number listed. A man answered. I hesitated for a moment. "Linda Harris, please," I asked. There was a pause, and I could hear someone crying in the background, presumably Linda. "Who's asking?" Larson's voice came through. "Her father, you piece of shit," I lied, unable to suppress my anger. "And don't bother talking to her. Just tell my daughter to forget me. Leave my grandchildren, my son-in-law, and me alone. Goodbye, asshole." Less than a minute later, feeling a pang of remorse, I dialed Linda's cell number. She answered right away but was still crying. "Hello, Linda," I said, breaking the silence. "Did you have a good day?" "John, why?" she asked. "Why did you tell my father? It could destroy him. He's been in such poor health lately. You knew that." "Hey, don't shift the blame," I said, forcing myself to utter the harsh words. "It wasn't your father who was on the phone with your lover, it was me. I care about your father, and your cheating would have killed him. Let me make something clear. Are you listening?" "Yes," she said. "I'm listening. Don't let this guy come between me and my daughters, or your father will find out everything about you. All the raw details, as you put it," I warned. "Don't think I'm joking. I've trusted you for most of my adult life. I didn't think it was possible, but you shattered that trust. I'm struggling not to just end this right now. I'm filled with so much hatred for you, and that's what defines me at this moment. Do you get it?" "Yes," she said between sobs. "Mark, I'm so sorry. I never wanted this." "Neither did I," I replied, and hung up. 6 months later, I got the official divorce papers marking the end of my marriage. Although I had moved past my depression, there was still a sense of emptiness in my life. I couldn't quite pinpoint what was missing. I tried dating again, but didn't get very far. I guess the women I met could sense my emotional baggage. I had a one-night stand with a fellow work colleague who was also divorced. But even that left me feeling more alone. Sex felt meaningless without love and affection. We were just two adults seeking momentary relief, but it only deepened my sense of isolation. One evening, after coming home from work, an epiphany hit me. Since moving into my new apartment and selling the old house, I had been giving names to the dust clumps around the place. "Hi, Jack," I said, peeking out the door. I was reliving my bachelor days, naming the dust bunnies I found everywhere, especially behind doors and under the bed. Jack stood by the front door, while Roger and Bugs resided under the bed. I almost reached for the vacuum cleaner, feeling embarrassed at the thought that Larson would never let his place get this messy. I almost grabbed the vacuum cleaner from the closet, feeling embarrassed that Larson would never leave his place in such a mess. The next day, I tore off a corner of a condom wrapper and left it lying on the floor by the bed. I shook up the blankets, jumped around a bit in the middle of the bed to dishevel the sheets, and then carefully placed the blanket back in almost the same position. I also left marks from 2 glasses on the coffee table, some ashes in the toilet, and kept the ceiling fan running. I picked up a porcelain trinket, smashed it, and tossed the pieces in the trash. I grabbed a rare bottle of wine from the shelf, chose the dustiest one, opened it, poured it out, and left the empty bottle in the trash. That was my grand finale. Later that evening, my phone rang. It was Sarah, my youngest. "Daddy, you have to do something," she pleaded. "Anything for you, honey," I responded. "Help Mommy," she said, struggling to keep her voice steady. "She's at the police station. This guy hit her, and she called the police. She has nowhere to go and doesn't want to go back there anymore. He's gotten really violent lately." "Hang in there, honey," I interrupted. "I'm not the guy to help your mother. I hate her deeply and, honestly, I'm kind of enjoying what's happening to her, not the beating, but the mess she's made with her new guy." "What's going on, Daddy?" Sarah begged. "She's my mom and she needs help." Okay. "It's only because you asked," I said. "Don't expect me to do more than just pick her up and drive her somewhere." "Thanks, Dad," she said. A few minutes later, I was at the police station. Linda was still being questioned, so I had to wait. I sent her a note letting her know I was waiting. An hour later, I felt a pang of guilt when I saw Linda, her left eye swollen and black. She cried as she approached me with open arms. I struggled, but managed to keep her at arm's length. "Hey, I'm here because my daughter asked me to come," I said. "Don't think for a second that we're going to be friends. I'll give you a ride wherever you need to go, but that's all." I walked out of the police station without looking back to see if she was following. Her sobs were the only indication she was near. Once we were in the car, I asked, "Where do you want to go?" "Home," she replied. Without a word, I drove to our destination. Linda only reacted when I turned onto Larson Street and parked in front of the house. "I don't want to go there," she said, her voice trembling with tears. "Look, Larson's in jail right now. You have plenty of time to gather your things and leave." She stared at me for a moment before getting out of the car and heading to the apartment. Soon, she began hauling out trash bags filled with her clothes. She hadn't taken much when she left me, so she was done quickly. Afterward, we left. A few minutes later, she asked, "Where are we going?" Her voice was filled with apprehension. "We're going to your father's house," I told her. "You said you wanted to go home. You don't have another home." We drove in silence for a while. Her father lived far out in the suburbs. Linda broke the silence. "I didn't get a chance to apologize to you," she said. "I'm sorry for what I did. I was foolish and you caught me cheating. I admit that, but I never stopped loving you. I just forgot what that meant for a while. I didn't even want to stay with Eric, we didn't have much in common. I'm sorry for hurting you." I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. Could I have said, "It's okay"? Absolutely not. Could I tell her I forgave her? That would have been a lie, as I still resented how she had ruined our marriage. My silence, I believe, hurt her more than any grand speech could have. As we neared her father's house, Linda looked at me and asked, "What am I going to tell my father?" I was at a loss for words. What the hell? We've been divorced for months and you haven't told him? I just told him we were having trouble, Linda said. You're definitely in trouble now, I replied. Find a good reason, but don't make me the bad guy, or I'll tell him the whole truth. It was late, and I didn't offer to help Linda move her things into her father's house. For one, I was savoring her misery. For another, I didn't want to face Walter. The next day, I parked across the street from Larson's house. He got home just before noon. It was time to deliver the final blow to their affair. I grabbed the cheapest bottle of Chilean wine I had bought, a $10 investment, and headed up the stairs. Larson answered the door, surprised to see me. Hi, I said. We've never met, but I'm John Harris, Linda McKay's ex-husband. I handed him the bottle of wine. Here, take this. I'm not a freeloader. This replaces the other bottle of wine I emptied. I pulled a key from my pocket and handed it to him. Oh, and I won't be needing this either. Linda moved out last night. I smiled all the way to my car, feeling a spring in my step. Revenge can be so satisfying. I felt like I could finally move on after getting my revenge on that bitch.